Vivix, a South African friend of mine who usually does videos about animal games, recently invited me to an unbridled trail ride. This was a ton of fun and we laughed way too much. If you guys want to go check that out, please check the link in the description below. On the 2nd of June 2023, Astride would launch its early access game version to the masses, with a price tag of €25. The resounding backlash they received upon release was intense, to say the least, and for good reason. The entire game consisted of a paddock, a riding arena, a horse creator, and a jump mechanic that was not fully or even well implemented, with no rider in sight. People were rightfully ticked off, citing frustrating gameplay, tiny area, and soundless environment as their chief concerns. But after the dev explained the situation of their setbacks and how strict contracts are with government funding, people calmed down at least a little, willing to give Astride another chance. And that chance would come 6 months later, on the 1st of December, when they finally launched their first big update after that fiasco, addressing all the problems the players had with the game, or they were supposed to. I'm going to be reviewing this game today, or at least giving my first impressions. Of course, I will be keeping in mind that this game is still in a very early stage of development, but the sad fact is they are asking money for this project, which means we must discuss what value this product offers to the customer for the price tag. I know a lot of people are already in the comments telling me that I have no right to judge a game in early access, but I always say the second money is involved, all bets are off. But before we do get into that, I'd like to thank my coffee supporters for being more awesome than a PC jousting game. I really want a proper PC jousting game, please. Let's get into it. Now, the bugs are the main issue for this update, but let's leave that for the end, shall we? And for now, let's focus rather on the first thing you'll see upon booting up the game, the visuals. And it's an immediate downgrade? That is some stark-ass lighting. Where the first early access version had a softer color palette that made the colors pop against the backdrop, this version has a harsh sun and sharp lighting that creates extremely dark shadows and crass lines. So much so that some of the horses are barely visible in the game. This is most apparent in the horse creator, where you can now barely see the changes in the horse coats. You also see this clearly, or not so clearly, in the stable area where the small entryway is almost completely black. And pumping up the graphics does not help at all, and instead crashes the game if you're in a server.
Yeah, no, I changed. I'm recording this. Holy
I'm rubber banding. Bad.
Fun. Some other fun glitches are the halo of green you will encounter when riding in grass, also clipping grass that is floating, and the horses twitching when riding on uneven ground. It's horrible, like crackly horses. Why? And yes, I will be talking about the twitching demon next to me, but that's for later. Beyond that, we have flat trees, rocks, and ugly textures that just make the experience unpleasant. I'm really not one to focus on graphics, truly, but in this case, I can see a clear downgrade from the original. It looks a little tacky. It's a mess, the visual, and it's a tragedy, as the horse models are very beautiful. You can see a lot of love was put into this part, and having a rider is quite nice. I would very much like a third-person option to actually see my rider's movements and appreciate them, but that is more or less a pet peeve. We do have a rider now, and we do have the option of climbing on and off the horses, so this is definitely a step up from the previous game. Something else to be mentioned about the area is they added round pens, indoor and outdoor arenas, a racetrack, and I believe 2 show jumping arenas in total to play around in. So that is definitely an upgrade and gives people a lot to at least explore and have fun in. But this crass lighting still kills the soft, calming atmosphere from the first version. There is no atmosphere here, only harsh lines and dead lighting, and this makes it feel and look like any other game just using assets. I understand that the environment is an asset pack, which is more than likely the reason it doesn't look so good, but the problem is a lot of time was spent adding these assets into the world and will more than likely be dropped, and something that will be dropped took away time from the developing of the game, which caused a setback on the gameplay, I believe. I could be wrong on this, but if the environment had looked good at least, I would not have minded so much, but it just doesn't look good. It looks tacky. Onto the gameplay. Now you have 2 gameplay mechanics that are currently in the game, dressage and show jumping. We'll start with the show jumping. It's still broken and clunky. I wanted to be able to ride properly to enjoy the jumping mechanic and appreciate the movement and gameplay. What I'm left with is janky movement, a jump animation that goes into slow motion for some reason, and a new striding system which I'm not sure if it's better just yet. I'm gonna have to explain strides real quick just to make my point, so bear with me. For those who might not know, striding is the distance traveled between the lead leg landing, a cycle of movement, and the lead leg landing again. That is a stride, as I'm showing on the screen. Now in show jumping, you are judging the distance between you and an obstacle consistently and adjusting your stride accordingly to ensure the horse jumps as close as it can without knocking a pole. It's a distance measurement and it's an absolute art form. And one of the reasons why top tier show jumping is so difficult. Courses are often designed to create tricky striding and make it difficult to judge distance or adjust a stride quick enough. Striding is becoming more and more common in horse games, and Astride is aiming to add this into theirs as well. But it's a shell of what it could be. While jumping in the game, you have a line of blue dots that represent one stride each. At the bottom of the obstacle, there is a bar of 3 colors: green, amber, red, which shows where you need to put the blue dot in order to have a good stride and jump. You're probably guessing it has to be in the green. You would be right. As you're approaching, you are adjusting the stride to get the blue dot into the green bar, as I just said. And if you do, you jump. Simple. But here's the problem. Because the information of the stride is focused at the foot of the obstacle and on the ground, my eyes and focus is entirely on that bar. Meaning I'm not getting a feeling for striding, I'm getting the feeling of analyzing a puzzle. Basically, there's no flow and excitement as there would be if I was show jumping. Essentially, the camera needs to be locked at a near isometric position to ensure I can see where the bubble is at. It's also very dark and not very clear at times, and oftentimes I don't even get the bubble in the green and then it jumps, and then when I get it, the bubble in the orange later, it will not jump, and sometimes it does jump with the orange, but sometimes it doesn't. It's not very consistent information being relayed back to me, which just makes it even more frustrating. A great example of an exciting and smooth striding system is from Tales of Rain Ravine. All the information is being given at the side of the screen for the speed of the horse, and you are adjusting to ensure the horse lands correctly in front of the jump. You don't really have a guide, you just have to kind of feel it. And your focus is on the horse, and this makes it feel more organic and real. You'll more than likely be able to play Rain Ravine in first person as well, because it is a distance measuring mechanism, whereas that would basically be impossible for Astride, because if you can't see the ground, you don't know when to jump, it's locked in third person essentially. Now, to be fair, this could be a matter of simply relying too much on the information the screen is giving me. So perhaps an interesting idea would be to have the option to remove the prompts and see if you can still determine the movement of the horse and eyeball the strides, so to speak. If this works, then they have a good striding system. I will say though, although the first version was just as clunky, it did feel more intuitive. We had to get the front legs into this white bubble. It was easier, more intuitive, but still challenging enough to struggle a bit. This one is just too fiddly and makes the jumping more of a frustrating action than a flowing one. Now let's talk about the dressage mechanic. It's very simple, switch out gate situation where you get points for switching out accurately. This is of course just the base for dressage, so right now it's not very exciting or really fun to do, but it's there. One problem I have with the dressage is that switching from walk to trot or from canter to trot is a lot more difficult than it needs to be.
My horse switches out from walk to canter, not from walk to trot for some reason. That's really bizarre.
Yeah, I know. I'm struggling with that too.
Going back again to the previous build, I quickly realized that I had far less issue doing this than I have with the current build, which is not only annoying, but downright bizarre. How did the horse key inputs go backwards? The other issue is more a bug, but it's still annoying. If you have 2 people in the game and both of you do different tests, or even the same tests, you end up with test markers overlapping and you can't see what your movement is supposed to be. But with the dressage covered, let's talk a bit about gaits, movements, and animations. It's fine. The problem I have with the movement is there are so many animation issues. Not the loop of the animation per se, meaning the start and end of an animation cycle, those are bloody gorgeous and you can see a lot of effort was put into that, but all the goofy side issues. The horse goes into this slow motion trot and walk, which looks really silly, especially this walk. It looks like an old man walk. Get off my saddlery! Same with the piaffe, which is something new they added, and the loop is very pretty, but again, we get this weird slow motion thing, and it just looks really silly. What gets me is that this was an issue since the original release in June, which is quite shocking. I thought these animation problems would have been smoothed out by now. Then we have the jump, and again, it goes into a sort of slow motion thing when it's jumping. In the earlier versions, at least the jump speed remained consistent, even if it was all over the place. But even if the jump is better, it's not better by much. It still clips at the beginning and clips at the end, and again, it's been 6 months. Maybe less piaffe and passage and more smoothing out what you already got, guys. And then we have the gallop, and I want to scream.
There's no stretch to it. There's no stretch to it. Let's see if I can go as fast as I can. There's no stretch to those legs. They remain bent.
Let me compare to the original real quick and explain what's going on here by showing a little image of an actual horse running. We can see a full stretch of the leg before it makes its move downward. That would make sense, as momentum and muscle is pushing the leg outwards. In this case, the horse's leg is bent and only stretches out as systematically as it goes down, which doesn't make any sense at all because the horse is then not utilizing the full stretch of its legs to gain ground. It's essentially the lazy man's gallop, but it just looks bizarre, especially when you compare it to actual horses running. I don't know why they changed the gallop. It's literally driving me insane. But let's get into the funnier side of this game, the bugs. Early access games will always have bugs. I'll explain a bit why these bugs in particular bug me, so to speak, but let's first take a look. Okay, ooh, I'm done. So I said earlier that I would be talking about the twitchy person next to me. This is essentially a bug that is going on with the multiplayer feature. Anytime you let someone into your game, this is the way they look. They look essentially like a Japanese ghost, which is horrifying. I don't mind a horse horror game, but I was not expecting Astride to take that direction. Interesting. But it is sincerely annoying, especially if you want to do role plays or if you want to do trail rides. If all your friends are spazzing out as if they're demonically possessed, it's not exactly appealing to look at. And again, it hinders the atmosphere and feeling they were going for. And once again, it's also a downgrade from the original. We did not have this problem in the original build. I don't know what's going on. The previous version was a lot more stable. This one is just plain old broken, jittery, and it feels like a lot less polish went into it, aka it was rushed. I'm sincerely disappointed. This was not an upgrade after 6 months. It's a downgrade in some respects, which is shocking. I'm having a lot more fun in the previous version because it doesn't burn my eyes, and there's something soothing about the atmosphere. It's a mess, but it's a mess that I think could have been avoided if the game was not open to the public. Early access is a wonderful tool for developers to get a feel for what their audience might want in a game. It can give them direction, ideas, and concepts, but it is absolutely a double-edged sword. When a game is in early access, all the ups and downs of development is shown to the public, meaning the public can get outraged and angry and attack the devs if they don't like the direction the game is going or if it's going slowly. It also means the door is open for demands. People who want to force the game in a specific direction, and developers can and do fall prey to plain old peer pressure. Because if they don't do what the public wants, then they are plainly in trouble. I believe, from an outsider's perspective, that this was a sort of peer pressure that was applied to Astride. People demanded dressage, people demanded a larger area, people demanded a rider. As a result, the dev team had to restructure and reanalyze what they originally wanted to do and had to adjust to the demands of the players, and this is why we got this. Whereas if the game had been in closed beta, the devs would have simply continued developing, moving at a pace and direction that was comfortable, changed out what they needed to change out as they move forward, and we also would not have been privy to the ugliest side of development, which is another risk you run. We are seeing a very ugly part of Astride's development. I certainly understand that it can change, but a lot of people won't see it that way. Especially not when you're asking €25 for this game in this state. It is just not acceptable. Now, this is of course only a theory, but the reason I say this is because at this point in time we still don't have a basic gameplay loop. Yet they're making collectibles for players to find in a store-bought asset-built area. I hope you see where I'm driving with this. Early access games are usually games that have already established their loop, their core gameplay concept, and usually only now need to add more features and more content and smooth out some wrinkles. Astride literally has nothing. I was generous in June because I understood they'd had a pretty rough time of it, but now 6 months of pure development later, and what we get is placeholder assets, no sounds, animation still broken, half-finished riding mechanism, and now broken multiplayer, which is why I say horse games really should not be in early access. Any game should not be in early access unless the game has a proper gameplay loop that they can just build up on. Otherwise, you're gonna sit with people demanding what they want from your game. This was another misstep for Astride, but what concerns me more is the lack of reaction from the community. I just said that giving too much feedback can push developers into a bad direction or make them prioritize stuff that really should not be a priority. But the opposite is also true. No critical feedback creates toxic positive echo chambers. People in the Discord are just telling them they are amazing and wonderful and supporting them after this launch, which is good for morale. But how are these developers supposed to know what to fix if all you guys can do is praise them for what they did, even if it's bad? Honest criticism is so needed with any sort of creative project. Without good, proper feedback, this game will not get better and it will not grow into something good. What's even worse, most of the people who were critical of this game simply left the Discord or don't speak anymore because it's just a barrage of white knights shutting you down. But the point is, as long as these people are keeping Astride wrapped up in a nice fluffy blanket of safety, this game will stagnate and eventually die. Which is why I'd rather be honest, because I don't want to see that happen.